This episode of Heavy Cardboard is brought to you from the great folks over at GameSurplus.com, bringing the world of board games to you. Now, on to the show. Heavy Cardboard, episode 106, Madeira, A Look Back. Coming to you from the De Oliveira Company in San Martino on the island of Madeira in Portugal. Welcome to Heavy Cardboard, where we talk medium and heavy strategy board games, war games, 18xx, other related topics in the board gaming hobby. We're your hosts. I'm Edward.
And I'm Amanda. Well, my new schedule is definitely going well. I mean, it's definitely a shift in how I have been.
You're talking on day-to-day life,
yes,
right?
Very much so.
We actually see each other more than we did previously.
We do. It's nice, but I'm not able to be on live streams and stuff and help out with that. But I am able to kind of do more stuff behind the scenes because I can, like I've talked about before, not go to bed an hour after I get home.
Right. I mean, you get home roughly 7:30, somewhere in that window, and you don't have to go to sleep until midnight.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And as long as I'm not streaming, we get a chance to see each other.
Yeah.
So that's kind of cool.
Yes.
Something different for sure. Speaking of which, we have, with streaming going on and changes and all that, we've decided to take a different approach, I think is a good way of talking about it in regards to caffeine.
Right.
So for those that don't know, we live stream games and other content over on our YouTube channel. And on occasion, we also do some live streaming over on a newer platform called caffeine.tv. And if you want to subscribe to us, you can go to caffeine.tv/heavy cardboard. What we've been doing in the past is basically doing the exact same thing we do on the YouTube channel, which is, teach and live stream these games.
Right.
But the way the chat is implemented right now hasn't been as conducive for viewers as it is over on YouTube.
It's hard. It's not a constant stream. It's whenever you say something in chat, it pops up for a second and then goes away unless people upvote it. Then it stays on the screen. So it's a little bit more hard to follow.
And it's not linear. And so there's no chat log and this and that. And so it's just not real conducive to the way we have been live streaming.
Right.
So we're actually going to use caffeine kind of as a sandbox for us, to where YouTube is going to be for y'all.
Right.
As far as, you know what? You want to learn the game, you want to watch, live and interact with us during the live streams, that's awesome. Or if you watch it after the fact, use it as a resource. Awesome.
Right.
Perfect.
Right.
Caffeine, however, is going to be less formal, I think is a good way to put it. And it's going to be more instantaneous, gonzo type streaming.
Right. Like, oh, hey, instead of playing this game in the basement, let's play it up in the studio and we'll live stream it on caffeine and people can watch us if they want. Right.
And it's going to be less, just less formal. Probably
less rigid.
Yeah, probably not going to teach the games necessarily over there.
Most likely not. Yeah,
we're just going to hang out. Like this week, we have on Wednesday. I am going to be live streaming me playing the Through the Ages app and then interacting with folks on caffeine and trying different stuff and using it as a sandbox. So hopefully you guys give us feedback and enjoy it, and come visit us while we're over on caffeine.
Definitely. Village Inn has kind of become our spot that we go a lot. It's kind of like a little diner here in Colorado area.
Yeah, it's not my favorite. The service isn't the greatest. The food is okay, but it's close.
And
so
it's open.
And it's open late, which, after live streaming, you get done 10:30, 11 or whatever at night. Hey, let's go grab a bite to eat if we're not going to eat here at the house.
Right, exactly. So we've been sitting there and hanging out, and a few days ago, we really sat down and really started to brainstorm and think about Golden Elephant.
Well, I mean, it's been an ongoing discussion, but really
actually write them down and really think about it and everything. And also trying to plan out as best we can how to keep Heavy Cardboard, quote unquote, alive while you are overseas for that long amount of time.
And we actually have a pretty good plan in place, both on the YouTube channel as well as here on the podcast. Yeah. I think things are going to go really well in that respect, because And we're going to be releasing a press release, our first official press release, coming up soon, because we have brought on some folks to help with the administrative and behind-the-scenes stuff, so that we move away from focusing a lot of our time and energy on administrative stuff and less on content. And we feel like this is going to allow us to do that. So we're really excited to bring on these folks, which they've been behind the scenes for the better part of a year or so, but now in a more formal roles, I guess would be a good way to put it.
Yeah, I think so. And kind of letting everyone know, hey, this X, Y, and Z is done by this person or whatever.
Yeah, I think so. And that's going to help us keep Heavy Cardboard alive while I'm at these conventions and all this stuff going on.
Correct.
Et cetera, since you're not going to be making the trip.
On Twitter the other day, someone mentioned that there is like a GoFundMe type of thing or a crowdsourcing thing for this gaming group in Uganda.
Yeah, so somebody mentioned it, and I apologize for forgetting exactly who brought this to my attention, but they brought it to a whole bunch of media attention, and I said, yeah, we would definitely mention it. So there is a website, it's called crowdfunder.co.uk, and there is a Uganda Village board game convention for 2018 that they are trying to raise money for. Now, normally when it comes to conventions or, crowdfunding, stuff like this, we don't promote a whole lot of stuff other than obviously our own over on Patreon or pledgehc.com. Right. But I'll be honest, this kind of piqued my interest a little bit because, we get a lot of run, or a lot of people listen to us, or fill in the right words, whatever you want to say, here in North America, almost every country in South America, Europe, Asia, et cetera, same with Australia, and, that area of the world. But in Africa, outside of really South Africa, they're surprisingly get a number of downloads from like Mozambique and Tanzania and all this. But Africa is kind of like for the most part, it seems, a less popular place to play board games, or board games aren't as popular on the African continent.
Yeah.
So when I saw this, and it's a bunch of high school kids that are putting this together, and I'm like, you know what? This is just really, really cool.
So they did it last year too. This is their second year. Last year they were able to raise the money that they needed, and this year it looks like they're going to be able to as well.
Yep. So they've raised £3,241 sterling.
Yes.
And they're shooting for a stretch goal of 3,400. So check it out. I think it's for a really cool cause, and spreading the love of board games around the world, literally in an area that, I don't think of when I think of board games.
Right.
So, so again, crowdfunder.co.uk, and then if you go in there and you search for Uganda Village Board Game Convention 2018, you'll find it. And if not, even just spread the word about it. I think it's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Big thank you to our sponsor, BoardGameTables.com. If you're in the market for a customized, one-of-a-kind board game table, go check them out, BoardGameTables.com.
Episode 1 of Heavy Cardboard was all about Madeira, and we decided to look back at Madeira, especially since I was not a part of the show at that point, and we thought that we would take the time even before we knew that there was a Kickstarter for a new version of Madeira.
Yeah, that one caught us all unawares. Like nobody gave us a heads up that the second edition or new version, or fill in the right word, is coming.
Right. No, we had no idea.
So Madeira was episode 1, as you mentioned. This is now episode 106. So it's been a day.
A couple.
Since we last covered the 2013 Golden Elephant Award winner, Madeira. So obviously published in 2013, designed by Nuno Bizarro Sentiero and Paulo Soledad. Published by What's Your Game. Artwork by the Mariano Iannelli of What's Your Game. Plays 2 to 4 players in anywhere from an hour to 2.5 hours. I think that's a little generous, but we'll get into that here in a little bit. As far as availability and cost, it's out of print. The only way you can get it is secondary market, or, I don't know, maybe a giveaway. But outside of that, there is a Kickstarter coming from What's Your Game that's going to upgrade the components, this and that, and have some other little stuff. There's more info that's going to be coming out. We don't have any inside info.
We have no. We found out when you guys did via a press release sent via email. So.
Yep, and that's that. As far as players or plays and player counts that we've experienced, man, at least a dozen, if not, 15, 18 plays for me across all the player counts.
Yeah, I don't know. I would say probably around the same for me, 10 to 12 at least.
So looking back on the game, both Tony and I rated it a 5 in episode 1. Well, actually back then it was on a 1 to 4 scale. Yeah. We've since redone that when we changed to a 1 to 6 scale, and we both rated it a 5. So I'm curious to see how that holds up on my end, as well as I'm curious to get Amanda's take on it. So there's a few different ways that we could have gone about this, and we just thought, you know what, we'll kind of re-review it just maybe in a briefer fashion a little bit. But talk about the 5 factors, give the game its weight, starting out with complexity or rules overhead on that.
The rules really aren't terribly complex. They can get confusing, of course, during initial plays, just like any other kind of heavy-ish game, but there's not so many rules that you're constantly, like you need a player aid to be able to go over point by point by point.
It does help that everything is very, step 1, step 2, step 3. You have the different steps. And the way the buildings resolve, that you have the characters in the buildings going around the board in one direction, and then you have the actual buildings going back around to resolve in the other direction based on how many workers you have out in the field, so on and so forth.
That can trick people up even that have played it a few times. If it's been maybe a little bit since you played it last, you can forget that, oh crap, I need players in that, I need people in that area before I can actually resolve that.
Yeah, before, I can actually take the benefit of the buildings, you need to make sure that you have at least one, or if you're trying to do the extra good action,
need 3.
You need to have at least 3. So, yeah, there's definitely not a ton of complexity as far as the rules, but there's enough there that this is definitely contributing to the weight of the game, but it's not overly taxing, I think,
I would agree with that. Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to describe it.
However, the planning aspect, this is definitely where the meat of the weight comes from. You need a plethora of planning for sure. From the dice you're going to choose at the very beginning of the round, as well as do you take all your actions, or do you decide, you know what, passing early to be able to select the turn order in which you want it, to be able to select dice for the next round, as well as the king's request.
Right.
And because as the game progresses, being able to pick those up, I'm telling you, there's a lot that you have to plan for, and there's a lot of decision space here in this game.
Another thing that you have to take into consideration is if you make ships or anything, if you have any type of, or any workers or anything, you have to make sure that you have enough bread and enough wood for upkeep.
Feed and heat, the whole idea, that goes back to Uwe Rosenberg, that there's upkeep every round, and that's in all 5 rounds.
That's a big thing to remember, because if you don't have that, guess what you get?
Pirates.
That's right.
And pirates can decide the game if you end up with any pirates left over at the end of the game. And then, of course, there's the crown request tiles, which at the end of the first, third, and fifth rounds, you're going to have to complete, whether you can or not, you're going to complete them 1, 2, or 3 respective, depending on whether it's round 1, 3, or 5.
And this also kind of goes into what you were talking about earlier about even the deciding factor of when to pass, because if there's one specific crown request tile that there's only one left, and that's literally the only one that you can for sure complete, maybe you have to pass super duper early to make sure that you get that. And that's just one other aspect of the planning.
Yeah, because it factors in so much of your score that you absolutely have to plan accordingly for it. And placing workers in areas that are going to allow you to do the things that you want when the buildings activate later on in the round with the dice placement. Not only that, but then you have to factor in, okay, do I have workers in the city watch to then be able to use the pirate dice, which, you know what, I don't really care about the building action. I just want to take the character action, which is what happens when you actually place the dice. So you don't place a marker there, which signifies that you're going to take the building action. instead, all you're doing is, I just want the character action. But you have to have people in the city watch, because to be able to take a die, you have to take somebody off the board and bring them back to your supply to use that die. And on top of that, another thing you have to plan for is you not only need bread for your upkeep, but if it's a lower value die than the region in which you want to place it, you have to spend bread to be able to change the value of that die.
Right.
So if all that's left, whether it being in your own personal dice or whether it's one of these City Watch pirate dice, well, if all that's left is a value 1, you want to put it into the number 3 region, well, guess what? You better have a couple of bread, or sorry, you ain't doing that.
Right, and this plays into the luck and random factors, because there are dice in the game that, obviously is a luck factor and randomness, but it is mitigatable by the bread, like you said. So it's not entirely luck and random, but it's also entirely not.
Right, and you roll the dice before the beginning of the next round, so plus players are going to choose their grouping of dice, right, based on the turn order from the previous round, or if it's the first round,
right,
whatever. But there's only 1, 2, and 3, so you got a 33% chance of it being the region. But again, the dice before the round begins. So you know what? Plan better.
Right.
And that goes back, yes, mitigatable luck, but also back to the planning aspect, right?
The only other luck or random factor would be the way that the Crown Request tiles come out.
You mean as far as pregame and the distribution
right.
of them, and same with the guild favors as well, where those end up, as well as where on the islands in the 3 colonies, what special abilities are available.
Right.
But all that's more variability than randomness,
right.
because it's all pregame randomness.
True.
Right?
That is true.
So that makes sense. So the only real randomness in this game is the die rolls. And then, well, I guess there is one other aspect of the dice come into is trying to figure out the cost to activate the buildings.
True.
Because if you have, depending on player count, it's going to be $9, $8, or $7 minus the die rolls of the non-pirate dice. So if there are 2 dice in a location in a 4-player game, you roll 4, well, guess what? You're going to end up having to pay $6 or $5 or $6, sorry. Or you're going to take a number of pirates, whether that's 1 pirate or up to 4 pirates if there's a pirate die, because you're rolling that. So there is some randomness there that you can't really mitigate, but you can plan.
You can plan for.
Plus, there's the guild favors that some of them help offset some of those costs, or little rule breakers that you can acquire. So there are definitely ways to mitigate all of this die rolling. I make it sound like there's a ton of die rolling. It's all pre-round or pre-activation
right.
of the buildings. So again, if you've properly planned for it, then you're good to go. But if you haven't, then it bites you in the butt.
Yes.
And it should bite you in the butt.
Correct. You shouldn't be able to all of a sudden magically be able to do whatever you want. No, you need to be able to plan for any outcome.
Now, as far as game length goes, do you feel like it contributes to the weight here? Because I do. I think you and I differ on this.
It might, depending on the number of players.
Yes, I think so.
In a 2-player, no. In a 4, yeah.
It can drag a little bit
yes.
In the 4-player game, depending on the play. I mean, obviously, if you have considerable amounts of slow players, whether you want to call it AP or not, but you have thoughtful players,
right.
The game's obviously going to take longer. So I do feel like that requires a certain... I think being able to maintain concentration over the course of a long game, that's a learned skill.
Yes, definitely.
And so I feel like that should contribute to the weight of a game if it is appropriate. And here, I think, especially at the 4-player game, I think that factors in here.
That's a valid point. And I didn't really take that into consideration whenever I was thinking about it. But I feel like that now that you've put it that way, it definitely makes sense, because it's not a game where you can check out when it's not your turn. You just can't.
Yeah, you should be engaged the entire time.
Yeah.
And again, that takes concentration. That's a learned skill.
Yeah, very much so. What about getting it? How long do you think it takes for that?
I think a full game, really, because you warn players at the beginning of the game, don't be afraid of taking pirates, because pirates, at the end of the game, whoever has the most pirates, you're going to lose 16 points and essentially be out of the game. You're not going to win if you have the most pirates. And in some games, in a 4-player game, it could be that 3 players have 0 pirates. One person has 1 pirate. Well, guess what? You're in last. Ergo, you lost 16 points. Playing better. So with that there, folks know that they have to get rid of their pirates by the end of the game, but there's that switch that has to be flipped, because if you completely avoid pirates, then you're not doing enough actions during the game. Whereas if you're getting them with reckless abandon, you have to be able to get rid of them, and you have to figure out when you need to switch that from, I don't care about acquiring pirates, to be able to take these better or more or whatever actions. But at some point, you do have to flip that switch and figuring that out.
And no amount of warning and no amount of making sure people understand will ever take the place of actually experiencing it. So you definitely need, in my opinion, at least 1 game.
I think so. Plus, being able to, it's one thing to explain to players that, oh yeah, hey, by the way, you're going to be doing 1 crown request of the 2 that you get, 1 at the beginning of the game, 1 you've acquired at the beginning of the first round. You have to complete 1 of those. But everything that you take will be resolved, whether you score 0 points for it or not. So by the end of the game, you will have taken 6 crown requests, which are, kind of like little goals that you're shooting for to get max points on. So everything you take, you're going to resolve. It's just a matter of when you resolve it. Is it in round 1, round 3, or round 5?
Right. Maybe it's something that takes you 5 rounds to get to. Maybe it's something that you can do quickly.
Right. And so it's just a matter of planning for that. And it just I think a full game here is definitely the amount of time that it's going to take to get it.
Definitely. What do you think the weight of the game is?
I definitely think it's on the heavier side of medium.
Yes.
It's that has held up. I don't feel like that has changed. It hasn't really gotten considerably easier, which kind of surprises me, because a lot of games have for me. You're talking whether that's a Zulkin, or I remember being like, wow, there are so many. And now I use that as a wind down type game. Right.
And I actually would say the opposite for Madeira, because I remember whenever we were playing it, when you guys, were going to review it and everything, it was so incredibly difficult for me that I said I didn't like it because it was so hard that I didn't want to have to play it. But I can own that now and say that that's why. But it has just drastically changed the way that I approach it. It's not so hard that I want to die anymore. So I think that that's just me growing as a gamer and me growing with the concentration aspect, like you were talking about before.
So where would you say it falls?
It's still medium heavy for sure, but it's not ZOMG, oh my God, the hardest game ever like it used to be.
Okay, fair enough. Cool. So as far as component, graphic design, artwork components, it's standard Euro quality, I feel like. There is nothing exemplary, but there is nothing deficient here.
No. The crown requests and guild favors are, the normal thick kind of cardboard. The boats and the workers are wood, but the goods themselves, like the sugar cane and the grapes and everything, are thin chits, kind of
just thinner cardboard.
Yeah, they're not the thick cardboard like the crown requests and stuff are.
But I don't also feel like that is to the detriment of the game. It doesn't feel chintzy. It doesn't feel like it was just a throwaway. I'm totally fine with that. I am curious to see, are they going to make those wooden components
I'm
now
interested to see that.
And whatever in the second edition. So looking forward to checking that out. But overall, it's fine. The way the Crown Request board is, it's modular and it's a puzzle board, which I really dislike those. But it's such a trivial, it's 2 halves depending on the player count and everything. I think it's a total non-issue, because normally I'm really anti-puzzle boards, because I feel like the edges of them get dinged and easy to curl up and mess up and crease on the puzzle piece joints.
But
themselves.
when there's that many options, though, for either a 2, a 3, or a 4 player, I don't really know any other way to do that other than a puzzle type thing, other than just having multiple boards, which would raise the price of the game and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, and That's a fair point. I won't argue that. I'm just saying I just don't like puzzle
Absolutely.
boards. However, here it's pretty trivial. It's kind of a whatever. That's fine.
Right.
But component-wise, overall, like I said, just it's fine. The player aids, they're on a cardstock, but it's a thin cardstock in the first edition. So the corners of those, it's easy to dog ear or ding or bend up a little bit. But whatever. Now we're nitpicking.
Yes,
I feel like.
very much so. And the box size is just the normal square size.
Right. Just under 12 inches by 12 inches to just under 3 inches, or basically 30 by 30 by 7 centimeters. Mm-hmm. Graphic design?
Clear and consistent throughout the entire game.
Yeah, I would say that. I do wish the player aid was a little bit more descriptive than it was.
It's very, very shorthanded. Like, very shorthand. Like, you kind of already need to know what everything means in order to understand the player aid.
And I assume that Mariano and Veronica did that at Witcher Game to make it more language independent.
Right.
But I do wish it was a little bit more descriptive and a little bit more, what is, right, that's what that is. So I get it on the one hand. On the other, I'm hoping to see in the second edition that's been broadened a little bit and a little bit better graphic design for the player aid itself.
But otherwise,
I think everything is pretty clear on the board. I don't remember ever having really any questions about that once we get going.
No, not really. Artwork.
It's typical Mariano Iannelli artwork. I like it.
Yeah.
But artwork is very, very, very subjective. So I know there are people that much prefer. I mean, if you're looking at Vinos, right? You're looking at the first edition from What's Your Game versus the so that's Mariano, and then the second edition is Tool. It's artwork. I mean, everybody has their favorites. Yeah, I like it.
I do too.
So yeah, it's it doesn't impede the gameplay, which is the important thing.
Right.
The absolute most important thing.
Rulebook clarity and quality. What about that?
I think the rulebook does a very good job of laying out the rules. I think it could be a little bit better as far as a reference, and that has kind of been the case the whole time, to where I still have to search for some things for those edge cases or the little obscure things. But I'll be honest, it's been so long since I've learned this game.
Right.
I don't even have to reference the rulebook to teach it. But I do have to reference it for, like I said, those small, oh, wait, is it this or this type thing? And that could be a little bit clearer or laid out a little bit more obvious. And the other thing that I would like to see, which they have done subsequently, but going back to 2013 they didn't do, is there is a small little section at the back that shows the different player count changes. I just want that very, very clear. To make sure that, okay, look, in a 2-player game, here's the changes. In a 3-player game, here are the changes.
Right.
I don't want to have to go through the entire rule book, which actually, now that I think about it, you didn't really have to do in this one.
It's mainly on the board, most of it, like how many areas for ships and stuff like that are open. But
also just the changes in setup and all of that. I want all that very clearly delineated, so I'm hoping that that's the case in the second edition as well.
All right, well, let's just talk about the game. So what makes it enjoyable to you?
The level of planning that is required in this game is pretty extensive. I feel like you really have to look forward and plan out your turns pretty far in advance. Yeah. It's definitely a strategic game mixed in with a little bit of tactical with those dice. But as long as you have given yourself a bit of a buffer with the dice, it leans more strategic, because the dice... They can affect you in some ways. Like if you got all ones and you want to be doing stuff in region 2 and 3, you got to pay out the wazoo for bread. I get that, but there are ways to work around that. But you're limited on the number of actions, like any good Euro. That's the case. There's a million things you want to do, and you only have like 58 times. I'm exaggerating, but my point is, there's always more to do than you're able to do, and there's a reason this won the Golden Elephant Award. And I stand by that still.
All right. One of the things that I very much enjoy about it is that the very initial placement, like even before the game starts, of your workers where you put them, that can bite you in the butt near the end of the game, and that's amazing.
Well, like Jeroen said over at Splatter, if you can't lose the game in the first turn, what's the point of the first turn?
Exactly.
And I'm on board with that. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, that's not going to be the case. You're not going to lose the game because of that here.
But a decision that you make early in the game might hinder you so badly that you can't win.
Or that you just, you know what, plan better. But the point remains, the fact that early decisions have an impact on late decisions, right?
Very much.
Or anything in between.
You cannot be afraid of pirates, like you said before. You can't be afraid of them, but you have to also make sure that you're strategically taking them, not just willy-nilly grabbing them for any reason at all. You have to be able to take into consideration, yes, I want to be able to do X action, which means I'm going to have pirates, which means, okay, I need to start planning on how I'm going to get rid of these things before the end of the game.
And again, this goes back to that planning aspect of this game, to where it's super, super heavy in a planning aspect, because if you're going to be taking pirates, which again go to that negative scoring at the end of the game, but you have to be planning out how you're going to mitigate them. Is that by placing a lot of people into the city watch, by getting rid of that, getting rid of them through that action? Or is it by taking the guild favor that's going to offset half your pirates every time you trigger that? But the problem there is now you're using your guild favor, and oh yeah, there's crown requests in which you need to have unactivated guild favors to be able to score those. So it really is just...
It's planning on top of planning on top of planning.
And it's just layer upon layer of decisions. Okay, bite me now, bite me later. I don't know which it's going to be. Which matters more? Am I desperate to be able to take this now because I know I'm going to pay for it later? Or can I hold off and be like, okay, I'll soften the blow later on?
Right.
And that push-pull between now versus later, that pressure that the game imparts on you just doesn't end in this game. From literally the very first decision to the very end, being able to do everything you want, as well as get those extra actions, or not extra actions, but the not being afraid of taking pirates to allow you to do those actions, but also to mitigate those pirates. That is that relentless pressure in this game that I absolutely relish.
Yes. And another way that we really haven't talked about pirate dice yet is using them to help you but hurt the other players.
Use them as an offensive weapon.
Yes. Each building can only have, like, say it's a 4-player game, can only have 4 dice. One of those can be a pirate dice, so that means that you are negating someone else's option or opportunity to be able to place a die there.
And not only that, but you're also potentially costing them more pirates and making it more expensive.
Right.
Because when you roll those dice to activate the buildings for everybody that has a marker there that originally placed one of those dice, unless it's the pirate die, that's lowering the amount of money that they can offset. So if it's a high die roll, but there's only 2 or 3 dice there, well, it would have been helpful if there was another die. Instead, it's a pirate die. And oh yeah, if you can't afford to pay to take the action, or you elect not to, now instead of just taking the 1 pirate, if there's no pirate dice there, now you're taking anywhere between 2 and 4. And again, it all goes back to that relentless pressure of, okay, I'm acquiring pirates, I got to get rid of these. And using those strategically placed pirate dice as an offensive weapon, that can, especially late, like people might be planning, okay, I have 3 pirates, I know how I'm getting rid of these 3. Oh snap, now instead of 3 I have 4, and that one difference might mean the difference between winning the game or losing the game. So using them as an offensive weapon is nasty, but also that's where more experience with the game has shown us the ability to use that as a weapon.
Yes. Another way to be able to obtain the wood and the bread and everything that's so vital to this game and upkeep is the cities.
Not to mention money as well is vital, because you've got to be able to pay to take those building actions.
Right.
Easy way to do that, and I say easy in air quotes, is being able to make sure that you have your workers in the cities.
Right, and that can be easily forgotten because you can get so enamored and so focused on the regions that you forget about the cities.
Right, because you have to have at least one, if not three, in a given region to take advantage of the buildings themselves. But you also need to be able to activate the city or the cities to get these resources. You need to have workers in those cities.
Yep.
And then being able to manipulate the neutral workers as well as your own workers to be able to move them around to get you more of those resources, whether it's bread, wood, or money. It gets expensive. So then you have more workers out on the board, which means your upkeep is going to be more expensive. And again, it's drawing a line between how much upkeep do I want to pay versus how desperate do I need these other resources and to be able to have the workers in the fields. It really is a high wire balancing act.
It
feels
is.
like.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. There's just, like we said before, planning upon planning upon planning upon planning.
And then using the City Watch to be able to mitigate some of the pirates that you get and be able to place the pirate dice, you have to be able to put workers into the City Watch. And there's only a couple of ways in which to do them, whether it's the building up in Region 3 or whether it is when you pass being able to take that action. But if you do that, you're going to end up going later in turn order, which means the dice selection that you have and your crown request selection is going to be lessened. And now maybe you don't get exactly what it is that you were wanting or that maybe what you needed. So it's that whole,
Just a
seesaw.
crazy balancing act.
It really, really is. And it's hard not to gush about the game.
Yeah.
But every decision feels meaningful. Every decision feels like it carries weight. And every decision has a certain urgency to it that, is this the thing that I have to do right now, or is it something that I'm doing right now that I could do later, but I don't necessarily want to do it, but I should do it right now?
I think one of the things that Tony said in the original review was, theme schmeme, who cares about theme? And I agree to a certain extent. However, the fact that some of the fields in the game on the board will turn into one resource after being another resource at the beginning of the game is very thematic, and it matches what happened in that exact region in the past. And I think that's just a cool little aspect of it, a cool little thing that gives it a little bit of, oh, well, that's neat type of thing.
Well, not just that, but it can be ahistoric in a sense that if you don't clear the wood out of that area, it never actually transfers over into, if it goes from, say, sugarcane to wine or whatever, which is exactly, like you said, happened in these different regions in Madeira. But you have to clear the wood. And if it doesn't happen, then you're kind of changing the way it worked historically. But again, it's not a simulation, so I'm totally down for that. But I do like that little nod to history.
Yeah, that's neat.
As well as I'm sure there's a game balance reason to be able to, change what's available where, as the game progresses, to show the progression of time and the history of the island of Madeira. Which, let's face it, everybody involved in this, especially Nuno and Paulo, they're Portuguese, so this is their country's history. And I just appreciate that little nod to it for sure. As far as what's not to like, on the flip side of this, it can play long, right? It does have some amount of randomness with the die rolls, and it's hard. Like, it's a hard game to play well. But this really falls... See, I don't see these as negatives, really, because you can mitigate the dice. I'm okay with a longer game. So... And it could be AP inducing, but most games can possibly induce that. As I said, there's a reason this game won the Golden Elephant Award in 2013. It has held up for me. It has absolutely held up and shown over the course of the last 5 years that, no, I feel like we got this one right. I feel like this is one that has legs. There's a reason it's going to go to a second printing.
Right.
And it's going to have a second edition. Obviously, there's demand for it. If there wasn't, why bother, right?
Right.
So I feel much today as I felt when we first reviewed it. Although I don't find it as hard, I still find it very challenging for a game. And yeah, not a ton of negatives here for me. There really aren't.
Isn't. No, there really isn't for me either. There really isn't anything for me either that I dislike about the game. It plays beautifully. It holds up. It's held up for the last 5 years. For me, it has gotten easier, like we talked about before, but it's still mind-bending, and it's still something that I actively have to never turn my brain off at all during the entire game in order to be able to maybe be in the running to win. I don't think I've ever won this game, but that's okay. And again, I wasn't on the show at this point. I wasn't involved in the Golden Elephant Award aspect at all. But if I had been, this would have been my winner. And it was I did a series of pod blasts that kind of looked back on the different Golden Elephant Award nominees and winners and what I would have picked if I were on the show at that point. And Madeira was my winner as well.
So scalability, before we go into some comments from BGG here, I think it scales really well. I think it makes it a little bit more of an expensive game to be able to play at 2 players because of the fact that there can only be a maximum of 2 player dice per building.
Yes.
So even though the cost is slightly less, it just feels more expensive to be able to activate buildings. And so you need to, I personally feel like you need to have a better money engine going in as the player count goes down.
I could see that, yeah.
But other than that, do you have a favorite as far as player count for this?
My absolute favorite is 2.
Okay. I think I like it at 2 and 3 as well as 4, but 4 less so just because it can go a tad long.
Yeah, it just drags just a little bit. And with 2, it just bam, 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 bam. And it's a quick, very thinky game, but it doesn't take your entire day to do.
And the worker, not the worker placement, but the ship locations, there are less of them in smaller player counts as well. So that would be most of the mechanical scaling as well as the number of spots in the different buildings that you can place dice is based on the number of players.
Right. And comments?
So one of which says, Madeira is complex and long, difficult to teach and learn, difficult to intuitively grasp without multiple plays, and harsh to those who don't calculate their resource conversions exactly. To make a decision about where to place a worker or where to pass, you need to consider the dozen different systems your decision will affect. A dozen is too many. I would beg to differ, but okay. At the end of the game, one person had 1 pirate point, while everyone else had 0, so that person lost 16 victory points. This does not encourage making moves by intuition, and I'm okay with that as well. The ratio of complexity to fun is too high for me. I've seen people use the word elegant to describe it. I don't think that word means what they think it means. Sold. All right, so not every game's got to be for every player. Heavy game, brain burner, might feel exhausting after you're finished. Rewarding and enjoyable, scaled well from 2 to 4, my number 1 game of all time.
Wow.
I'm calling this a super Euro. A rich set of mechanisms that provide an excellent level of player interaction and a deep thinky strategy experience. It may take a few plays to naturally intuit the decision space with quality choices, but like the wine, I feel this is delicious and will easily stand the test of time. Instant classic. Now, interesting to note that this comment actually was made in March of this year, so last month. And here it is, 5 years after it came out.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I dig that. Wow, wow, wow. Absolutely great game. Relatively easy to grasp the rules and mechanisms, but which also interact to provide a rich, complex, and rewarding experience, particularly in the later game when the players must score multiple crown requests in a single round. The introduction of the pirate dice and the ability to fail to pay all of one's financial obligations also makes for very interesting play, particularly in later rounds when players are trying to ensure that they don't end up with the most pirate tokens, which are, accumulated over the game for ripping people off.
I'm going to go ahead and go with my summary because you always blow me out of the water.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
You're fine.
Okay. Madeira is a game that has stood the test of time, and I feel like it will continue to do so. I am proud and happy that this was the first review that Heavy Cardboard did. I feel like it's suiting, and that it was the first Golden Elephant Award winner as well. I feel like that games come and go, just like they say, friends come and go, but the true ones will stick with you forever. And I feel like this is one of those games that will always be around. It will always be something that people want to play, that people are excited to play, and that people want to be able to have in their collection.
Madeira is always going to have a special place in my heart because, as you said, this is the first review that we ever did on this show. So yeah, I'm kind of predisposed to like it still just from a sentimental standpoint. But screw all that. Set that aside. This is still a ass kicker of a game. It's still hard. It's still tough to play well. And that's exactly what I want in my games. I don't want a game that's going to give me everything on a silver platter. When I win this game, I feel like I earned the win. I feel like I outplayed my opponents, and it's not because of good or bad die rolls. I played better. And that's the crux of what the show was built on. Meaningful decisions, a competition of decision making. And you know what? This has it in spades. Yeah, I hesitate. It's a game that I'm never going to give up. It's a game that I'm never going to see ever leaving the collection. And it's a game that, while there are some days I might not be in the mood to play it because I know the investment that I have to make to play this game well, but this is about as close to a Hall of Fame game as I could get. I feel like we got this one right. 2013, well done, Madeira. So, all right, you have the floor, ma'am, since you never gave this game a rating, since you weren't a part of the show in episode 1. What do you got?
6. This is a Hall of Fame game for me. I have no doubt in my mind, one way or the other. I feel like my summary kind of spoke for itself. And, yeah, it's a 6.
I have in my hand one of the Heavy Cardboard Challenge coins on it. And I'm looking at it. And on the back of it, at the very top, it says plan better. At the bottom of it, play better. And yup, that kind of exactly exemplifies what Madeira is about. Plan better and play better. I originally rated it, I don't know what it was on a 1 to 4. I'm pretty sure it was a 4. Looking back on this, when we redid it to a 1 to 6 scale, I gave it a 5. I think it's a Hall of Fame. I would put it at a 6. So the question is, has it stood the test of time? Hell yeah. And much like Madeira wine, it's only gotten better with age.
That's right. And that's our look back at Madeira.
I think it's kind of appropriate that this episode comes just ahead of the 2017 Golden Elephant Award finalist episode that's going to be coming out next week. So yeah. I'm excited, and I feel like that's just, it feels fitting. We didn't plan it this way. Things happen, but I think that's pretty cool. So I'm really, really excited about next week's episode.
Yeah, I am too. And I am proud to call Nuno and Paulo friends. However, whether I like them or not, it wouldn't really matter. Their game is incredible, but they just happen to be 2 incredible human beings as well.
And I would throw in Veronica, and the feisty Veronica.
The very feisty Veronica and the very quiet and demure Mariano.
Apparently you haven't seen Mariano drink.
That is correct.
No, I'm kidding. Yeah, all 4 of them now who run What's Your Game. Obviously, they are all friends of ours, but the game absolutely was reviewed before we knew anything about them. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it definitely has stood the test of time. So it's cool to call them friends. And I'm really glad to see that the game has held up.
Yes.
So that's a testament to the designers as well as the publishers. Now I'm just really curious to see what happens with the second edition.
Me too.
We'll catch you guys next week. Have a wonderful week. And seriously, thanks for listeing, y'all. Spread the word about the show.
Yes. Bye, everybody.
Take care.